All right, man, peace. So Stephen A. Smith recently made news due to some asinine assertions that he made about NBA players wearing hoodies on the bench. Anyway, they're going to talk about it, and of course, I'm going to chime in.
Antonietta, thank you. So here's the deal. Cavs are struggling right now, losing their third straight game last night, but the drama's off the court. A little Twitter beef. So J.R. Smith not happy with this man to my right after he made some comments on his radio show, the Stephen A. Smith Show, last week about the NBA's new hoodie jerseys. Take a listen.
In game one, when they played against Boston, J.R. Smith was sitting on that bench in the fourth quarter with a hoodie on. I don't know why the hell Nike made these damn uniforms that have hoods attached to it, by the way.
Well, usually the reason why you would wear a hoodie, and you would only know this if you actually work out or train or if you're an athlete, is because most of your moisture out of your body when you sweat escapes through your head. Anybody who's ever boxed, if you did road work, particularly if you did road work in the cold weather during the winter, you'd always have to make sure that you have a knit cap on your head and that you wore a hoodie, because the moisture escapes out of the top of your head. That's the point of the hoodie in the first place, the so-called hoodie, and that's how it came into prominence. And you know, hooded attire is nothing new. In the ancient world, it was known as a mantle. Basically, it was a hood that you wore that was connected to a cloak or cape. All right, and it was worn by most of the ancient peoples of the world, particularly the so-called black man during the medieval time period. It was known as a mantle. Okay, so Stephen A. Smith is, he's having a real house Negro moment, if you want to call it that. Sometimes people talk for so long and they talk so much that they start to make statements that they're not even aware that they're making. And I believe that this is what happened to Stephen A. Smith.
You got a lot of those white folks in the audience that's going to think this is Trayvon Martin being revisited.
What a ridiculous statement. You know, that may be the most ridiculous statement that I've ever heard him make. And don't get me wrong, like I've stated in the past, I have nothing against Stephen A. Smith or any other of these black commentators, so-called black commentators. For the most part, they're just doing their best. Some of them are more simple-minded than others. Stephen A. Smith's problem is that he is a boule Negro. I made a video a long time ago, particularly when they first decided to involve Michael Bennett in the woke narrative. It's one of the, I believe, maybe the first video that I made featuring Michael Bennett, and it was in his back and forth with Stephen A. Smith, and I titled it "Boule Negro versus Liberal Negro." And this is way before the whole Michael Bennett narrative, because I saw it coming with him. And Stephen A. Smith is a boule Negro. What is a boule Negro? The job of the boule, basically, they're the so-called black elite that have been set up to act as intermediaries between the so-called black community and the elite Caucasians. Their job is to constantly keep the masses of so-called blacks off balance with their rhetoric. All right, what are some examples of boule Negro? Stephen A. Smith, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. Okay, Martin Luther King was boule. It is their job to keep the masses of blacks off balance. Now, sometimes they get rebellious, like in the case of a Martin Luther King. He was a boule Negro who got rebellious, so we saw what happened to him. But the basic job of the boule is to act as intermediaries. In the ancient world, for you brothers who are into the scriptures, the members of the Sanhedrin were boule. In the Greek, the term used there was bouletes. That's where you get the term boule from. Bouletes. It just means advisor to the king. I mentioned this in a previous video. That's why the Pharisees, when speaking of Caesar, they stated, "We have no king but Caesar." When you read John, the 19th chapter, they stated, "We have no king but Caesar." I believe it was John 19:15. But, you brothers could look that up on your own. Okay? Their job, the Pharisees' job, was to act as intermediaries between the masses of the scattered remnant of the Jews that had settled back into the kingdom of Judea, or by that time the province of Judea, and the Roman emperor. All right, who during the time of Christ, I believe the Roman emperors were Augustus, Tiberius, and Claudius, if I remember correctly. But you brothers could do all that research on your own and look that up, who the emperors were during the time of Christ. Point being is this. People like Stephen A. Smith, they have dual agendas. So you never really take what they say too seriously. A comment like that about hoodies shows his massive ignorance and how, to use one of his words, how asinine he is.
And I'm not joking about it. The bench is...
Please keep in mind, he stated that he's not joking, so he cannot try to retreat back and say that he was. Let me rewind it back real quick.
Just no forms that have hoods attached to it, by the way. You got a lot of those white folks in the audience that's going to think this is Trayvon Martin being revisited. And I'm not joking about it.
See, this is why I one of the main themes on my channel is that most of these liberal Negroes, if not all, they just want a hug from the Caucasian man. Okay? That's one of the things that they have in common with the Boule Negroes. They just want a hug from the elite Caucasians. They just want to go about it different ways.
The bench is no place for somebody to be wearing hoodies. I have no problem with hoodies. People shouldn't be stereotyped and stigmatized for wearing hoodies.
You just did that. This is why I say he was just talking for too long. He talked so long that he made asinine statements that even he, I think, deduced were asinine. If you have no problem with hoodies and people should not be stereotyped for wearing them, why are you saying that black athletes basically, which is what he's implying, is that black athletes shouldn't be wearing them on the bench because of what white people might associate with a black man wearing a hoodie, so-called black man?
I totally agree with the Miami Heat and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and Chris Bosh and Ray Allen and all of those guys when they donned those hoodies back then after the shooting of Trayvon Martin.
He's backtracking now.
By that wannabe cop, Mr. Zimmerman, who should have been convicted.
That's not what you were saying when he got exonerated. You were not saying that he should have been convicted. You were saying that there was not enough evidence. People like you and Charles Barkley had no problem with the exoneration. You said that it went through the judicial system and he was found innocent.
But the bench for a basketball player sitting on a bench with his team, that is no place for a hoodie. I don't know why the hell Nike did that. They need to get rid of them damn hoodies.
Really, all this is Stephen A. saying, Nike, how come you won't hire me to promote your items, like that beef jerky company has hired me, like a jackass on TV, sitting up in some athlete's stomach, trying to act like I'm in there. I'm an interior voice in their body, asking for some beef jerky. Please, Nike, hire me and give me a check so I can sing a different tune on your athletes wearing hoodies, or on NBA players wearing hoodies. I mean, this whole platform is just so ridiculous. Stephen A. Smith really should be ashamed of himself.
There's no place for a hoodie. A hoodie shouldn't be attached to a uniform that you can wear while you're on the bench during a game. But J.R. Smith had it on, and he wasn't happy. And psychologically, he can't deal with the relegation to the degree that Dwayne Wade can deal with it.
Well, I agree with that. I've made the same statements. It's just the truth. Dwayne Wade is a far stronger person mentally. But why is that? It's because Dwayne Wade's legacy is already set. Dwayne Wade has nothing left to prove. As I've already stated about J.R. Smith, J.R. is like the side chick who finally got a ring. He doesn't want to go back to being a side chick anymore. Dwayne Wade is the chick who has been married a couple of times to some very, very rich men. Now she's getting alimony checks from a couple of guys. She doesn't mind just going out on dates now. Dwayne Wade is like Ivanka Trump. Okay? He's set for life. He doesn't care. He doesn't care whether or not he gets wifed up anymore. He's already proved that he could be an affluent wife. He's already won championships. He's already been a prominent player on championship teams. All that, once again, has nothing to do with so-called black men wearing hoodies on the sidelines.
All right. So J.R. Smith clapping back on Twitter. I'm going to read 3 tweets for you. This first one. This man is always reaching.
I agree. And this one was definitely a reach. This was a Mr. Fantastic level reach.
What does me wearing my hoodie on the bench have anything to do with reminding white people of Trayvon? 1, they shouldn't forget about him. And 2, how does me, out of all 450 plus NBA players, seriously keep my name out of your mouth? And you want to talk about me not playing, that's fine. But don't try and put me in something I have nothing to do with, and I'm not the only one.
Let me say this quickly, and I've mentioned this before in passing. Many of these media members, particularly Stephen A. Smith, one of the main things that they like to allege about these athletes is that they're so sensitive today. Athletes are not more sensitive today. They're actually prone and privy to more scrutiny and criticism, and erroneous criticism, by more sources than at any time in history. When at one time an athlete was only covered by the beat reporter, and the beat reporter was not concerned about an athlete's personal business, now you have thousands of sports media outlets, you have bloggers, you have people all over the internet who cover these athletes and say things about them, sometimes true, sometimes not. And you're not sensitive just because you respond back to what somebody alleged about you. Now, what makes you sensitive is if you allow yourself to be manipulated by somebody who's just trying to levy a provocative statement, who really doesn't have a basis or foundation for any of their allegations. They're just trying to see if they can get a rise out of you, and they can do it, in any way, shape, or form. Now, sometimes you do have to respond back to your critics. You do have to let people know that there are boundaries in regards to what you're going to tolerate, because sometimes people who are operating on a very low level, they get off on trying to promote some type of interaction or response. Sometimes you have to let them know, but that does not make somebody sensitive. Okay? Or certainly not in contrast to former athletes. I remember when Deion Sanders poured a cup of water on Tim McCarver's head after the World Series game. I remember all type of shit. So, this is nothing new. All these guys are human.
Stephen A., I'm here for all of it. I'm going to sit back. Take it away.
Let me first say,
Okay.
I know J.R. Smith's brother, Chris, a little bit, former New York Knick. Great guy. The parents of J.R. Smith, I run across all the time, particularly his father, Earl. Good man. Got a lot of respect for them. I actually happen to like J.R. Smith a lot. I've known J.R. Smith since his days in Denver.
Yeah, come on. Let's get to the point.
He was a Sixth Man of the Year in 2013 for the New York Knicks. Very, very deserving of that reward. All of those things. And by the way, J.R. Smith is actually a very, very nice guy. So I want to preface.
He clearly was a very nice guy. To be honest with you, I thought that he handled your asinine statements pretty well.
Preface my comment by saying that to let everybody know that I acknowledge these things. But it's important that if you're going to get at me, look, I'm sitting up here, bloviating, we talking, we going back and forth. But make no mistake about it, I know what the hell I'm talking about. And when you challenge me on issues, particularly on things that are fact-based, I'm going to be ready. And J.R. Smith is wrong about this. I wasn't talking about J.R. Smith. I was talking about Nike. Nike's the one that made the hoodies. And I wasn't talking about him wearing a hoodie and doing layup lines, layup drills, or the warm-up line, or whatever, the layup line rather, or whatever. I was talking specifically, since J.R. Smith wants to ignore this, I was talking specifically about the J.R. Smith that was on the bench because he had only played 3 minutes in the fourth quarter of that opener against Boston, Max Kellerman, when he was sitting on the bench with his hoodie on, looking like a sad puppy because D. Wade was on the floor.
None of that has anything to do with anything. At the end of the day, now you're trying to use J.R. Smith to cover up for your idiotic assertions about a choice in attire that Nike has made, which is based in what they call ergonomics. All right. It's basically what is most feasible for the athlete. It's really not that difficult to figure out, Stephen A. Stephen A is somebody who obviously is not a professional athlete. He's clearly, if you see his physique, somebody who doesn't train, has never trained intensely probably ever in his life, other than playing basketball in the summertime and maybe going to the gyms in the wintertime when he was playing at a Division III NCAA institution where he most likely rode the bench most of the time unless they brought him in for somebody to jack up jump shots. Point being is this. The hoodies that Nike has developed for the NBA, as I've already stated, are based on an ergonomical perspective, meaning what is most feasible for the athlete. This is 2017 now. We're not in the 1960s where guys just wore basic warm-ups. Now you're thinking about what is going to help the athlete the most while he's on the sideline. What is going to stop him from getting sick? What is going to help him retain the body heat and the body temperature that he needs so that when he comes off the bench, his body is still ready to perform at the maximal level. These are all things that really Stephen A. really shouldn't be speaking on because It's not his forte. His forte is making outlandish and, quite frankly, idiotic statements.
For 8 of those 12 minutes, as opposed to J.R. Smith, who obviously reportedly was very upset at the fact that he was taken out of the starting lineup. My comments about the hoodie was simple. It's a matter of taste for me. I don't believe a player sitting on the bench needs to have on a hoodie. I wear.
No, sir, it wasn't a matter of public taste. It was a matter of the taste that you implied the Caucasian would have for what they would view in the black athlete wearing a hoodie. Please do not try to make it about your own personal preference. Your statements were more based on your belief in regards to what the Caucasian would perceive about seeing a black athlete in a hoodie. So once again, as usual, the one thing that really links the pro-black, the liberal black, and the boule Negro is that they all want that hug.
I wear hoodies, for crying out loud, but it ain't on first take, okay?
You're not a professional athlete, Stephen A. When you're sitting in a chair, are you worried about moisture escaping out of the top of that bald-ass head of yours? No, you're not. What you're worried about is putting on enough makeup to cover up your decaying face and having some black chick in the back draw a fake hairline on the front of your head to make you look less follically challenged than you already are.
It's not while I'm doing a radio show or anything like that. In my place of business, I'm ready to handle business, as you can see.
It's amazing to me that this guy is actually trying to, he's actually trying to substantiate his statements, not understanding, once again, the hooded sweatshirt was created for athletes. Athletes have always worn hooded sweatshirts. Always. I mean, you could look up photos of Muhammad Ali training when he was doing his road work. He always wore the hoodie, like I've already stated. If you've boxed before, if you ever trained and you do road work, you always wear a hoodie, right? Even in the summertime, you might wear a hoodie because that's what keeps in the body heat. That's what allows you to lose weight. And in the fall and the winter, you definitely have to wear a hood because the moisture escapes out of the top of your head. These are all things that this idiot doesn't know.
So there's an ambiance, there's an appearance, a presentation that matters, particularly when you've been relegated to the bench. Now,
that's also why many times you'll notice when athletes go and sit on the bench, they wear a towel on top of their head. Why do they do that? Because they're trying to stop the moisture from escaping out of the top of their head.
Now, having said all of that, I want to sit up there and say, first of all, Max Kellerman, I want to apologize because, you know what? It's a matter of taste. Some people don't mind the hoodies, others might. I might not like it, but Nike, it might work for them. Hell, their sales might be through the roof because of it. Just my personal preference. But here's the biggest reason.
No, your real personal preference is that Nike give you a promotional deal. If Nike was to give you an endorsement deal, you would change up real quick.
Reason I want to apologize. I want to apologize to J.R. Smith because, damn it, you need to be wearing the hoodies, maybe. You kind of need to hide. Let me look at these numbers, right? Because I took a look.
Now he's going to go on his ad hominem attacks. J.R. Smith was a guy who was not talking about him, wasn't bothering him. Yeah, J.R. may have been sulking in game one. Okay, big deal. If he was sitting on the bench and he didn't have a reaction, then you say, oh, J.R. Smith must not really want to start. All right, he wasn't bothering you. But because you decided that you were going to throw his name into your ignorant statements about hooded sweatshirts or hooded athletic attire, which is really what those garments are. That's hooded athletic attire because they're clearly, as I've stated, ergonomically engineered and designed, for athletes to retain body heat. Now you want to go into an ad hominem attack on what he's been doing on the court. It's pathetic.
Look at writing them down, Max Kellerman. Since I said that commentary that we played, J.R. Smith had 3 games against Chicago, Brooklyn, the New Orleans Pelicans. In those 3 games, he combined to shoot 3 of 20 from the field, 2 of 15 from three-point range. It's been so bad for J.R. Smith that the damn dude scored 11 points or 3 for 9 shooting last night in a loss to the New York Knicks, and they were ready to give him a standing ovation. That's how bad it is. Now, you're a champion who believes you should be starting, who you believe you'll be starting ahead of a 3-time champion in Dwayne Wade, and you might.
The reason why Stephen A. Smith talks like this about people is because he knows he knows that if an athlete were to come into the studio and choke the shit out of his ass, that he can call security on him and call the cops on him. Stephen A is a master troll. That's what trolls do. Trolls make statements for provocation and for attention. Oftentimes, trolling is based in a sense of inadequacy and insecurity that you're not where the target of most of your diatribes are. Meaning what? Stephen A wishes that he could have played in the NBA, but he can't. So he likes to sit up and make all these statements about professional athletes. This is why James Harden mocked him when he had him come out to the to the practice court and had him shoot. And all Stephen A did was throw up air balls and bricks. Because once again, Stephen A wishes that he could have been an NBA player. So that's why he aims so much of his vitriol at these guys. He's just jealous. You know, it's like the guy who got bullied in junior high and high school. He goes and becomes a cop so that he can beat up people. That's what Stephen A is right now. And this is why I led this video talking about Stephen A and many of these other commentators' statements or allegations towards these athletes about their sensitivity. Something like this would not have happened many years ago. Now, you had guys back in the 60s and 70s, guys like Howard Cosell, who would make pointed statements and pointed commentary. But long, extended diatribes and ad hominem attacks towards athletes who really have said nothing to you or about you, these are things that didn't exist back then. It really started. If we really want to go all the way back, you could talk about Jack Johnson. They made ad hominem attacks towards him, but that was an era that was totally based in overt racialized rhetoric against Jack Johnson, who really was the only major black athlete at the time. But you really didn't see it again until Muhammad Ali, where you had certain writers like a Red Smith or a Jimmy Cannon. For those of you who don't know, those were the top scribes of their day, sports scribes, who made a lot of personal attacks against Ali because of his affiliation with the Nation of Islam. And that's where it kind of started in regards to addressing the black athlete because of their growing prominence in professional sports. Because you mostly see it with the black athlete. You very rarely ever see most of these extended type of verbal attacks against Caucasian athletes. Certainly not about something as frivolous as wearing a hoodie. Like I've stated, if you've been if you go to a college, if you went to a college or a university that was racially mixed or had majority Caucasians, all those little white kids do is walk around all day with hoodies and flip-flops on. If you watch the Olympics, you watch the U.S. swim team, when they come to the pool, they always have hoodies on. The hoodie is one of the main, pieces of apparel that is worn by athletes. Why is that? Because once again, it retains moisture. It stops moisture from escaping out of the top of your head.
Might have a point because Dwayne Wade is 35 years of age and he might need to come off the bench because it will prolong his career. But if you're going to sit up there and whine and moan about not playing, why don't you play? Chicago, 1 for 8. 1 of 7 from threes in 32 minutes. 27 minutes against the Brooklyn Nets. 1 of 9. 0 for 5 from three-point range. Pelicans, 22 minutes, 39 seconds. 1 for...
Now, while he's doing this, I believe that this is through 6 games of the NBA season at this point when Stephen A is making these statements. So he's basically trying to hide, or he's trying to create a red herring for his asinine statements by pointing out J.R. Smith's stats through about the first 5, 6, maybe 7 games of an 82-game season.
1 for 3, and those were all three-point shots. And this is before you lost by 19 to the New York Knicks last night. And you gonna sit up there and have a problem with me? Have you lost your mind?
No, he didn't have a problem with you, Stephen A. He had a problem with your statements, which is why even you apologize, because your statements were stupid. All right? Stupid and unlearned. But people like Stephen A. Smith, he will only humble himself when a Caucasian man tells him that he's wrong. And this is what I mean when I constantly address the mentality and the psychological issues of the framework of quote-unquote black leadership that's set up in this society. They want you to think that they're pro-black, but they're really not. Stephen A. Smith, people like him think that they're giving so-called black men tough love, quote-unquote, when he makes the statements that he makes. In order for you to give tough love, and tough love is something that is appropriate, at certain times, because when you tell the truth, sometimes truths are inconvenient. Sometimes they hurt people. But, a lot of times you become a better person when you accept, these hard truths. This was, the main impetus behind me making that video, or the video series with Sanai Lathan, the Family That Prays videos that I made with the character of Chris, when he had to endure her diatribes to become a better person and grow as a man. But the main thing about the source of the hard truth or the tough love is that they themselves have to be informed. Stephen A. Smith is not informed on any subject. When you hear him speak, he's not informed on 90% of the things that he's talking about. What he is he's a great speaker, meaning he's a great bullshit artist. Like, he's a guy who could have been a great preacher in one of these churches, because he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he talks enough and he strings together enough words long enough to make people believe that he knows what he's talking about when he really doesn't. Now, does he know the game of basketball to a degree? Yeah, he does, because he played and he's covered it for a long time. But what he doesn't truly understand is how to truly research things before he speaks and when to admit that he's wrong. And he was clearly wrong about his statements about the hoodie. But now he's trying to throw J.R. Smith under the bus because he feels like he can, because J.R. Smith is not playing well enough to make Stephen A. take that L.
I said it with my final take the other day, and I'll say it again. Ball. Handle your business. This is not about an attack on J.R. Smith, the person. He's a good dude. The fact of the matter is, you didn't learn how to handle the damn basketball until last year. If you start playing the way you're supposed to be playing, you won't be concerned about any damn comments from me, because I'll have nothing to say, because you will have handled your business and you will have balled, which you are not doing. At the end of the day, your opinions about me doesn't change what I'm going to say.
Well, when you read J.R. Smith's statements in his Twitter response, he said he does not mind what you said about him. So your rant is poorly aimed at best, and when evaluated, is baseless. J.R. Smith explicitly stated in his Twitter response that he didn't care what you had to say about him. He said, say what you want to say about me. But when you try to make a correlation between J.R. Smith and him wearing a hoodie because of how white people will look at it and it will remind him of Trayvon Martin, like that wasn't a taste issue for you, Stephen A. You were not truly offended by a man wearing a hoodie because to you it was too street or too ghetto. It was based in how you felt white people would feel about it. Okay? See, a lot of black people, they got mad at what the owner of the Texans said, and I stated that may have been a Freudian slip. To me, this was a Freudian slip as well. And every once in a while, you'll get us a pro-black or a liberal black or a boule negro to make a Freudian slip that will reveal how concerned and how infatuated they are with the thought process of the Caucasian.
I'm watching, and so is the world. Handle your business, JR. Don't have me asking who the hell shot JR instead of talking about JR shot. That's all I gotta say.
And he was going at you. However, in lobbing something at you, I got hit with a little shrapnel there too, didn't I? Because he said something about this show not being as good as it once was. When in fact, since you just went over the stats, Stephen A., I will say, show's better than it's ever been, as reflected by the ratings, which in a TV market where it's becoming increasingly splintered, etc., we all know TV has its challenges across the board, and yet this show's ratings continue to climb. So I also took some personal offense.
Well, I would say I'll be more specific than you just were. Ratings are going down across the board, just in business, period. Nobody in particular. Ratings for October are up 38%.
Yeah.
I mean, these are facts.
Yeah.
So it's, listen, tomorrow's another day. Next month's another day. We don't know, but right now, I do your homework. I kind of think we're doing just fine.
Well, you should do your homework first, Stephen A. I'm not going to get into the ratings issue or the ratings battle. I really don't care what people's ratings are. I use these shows as a backdrop for my own commentary. I don't worry about what most of these people have to say, because most of what they have to say is based off a narrative or higher level corporate stipulations that are made upon these anchors who are really just, their job is just to propel or propagate corporate jargon. I don't give a shit either way. Do I believe that their ratings or that they have a higher viewership than they had before the Skip and Shannon show started? I doubt it. But I don't know how they compile their stats. I really don't care about their ratings. It is what it is. Point being is this: Stephen A. Smith made a very, very ignorant statement when he tried to correlate J.R. Smith's mental state with him wearing a hoodie and what the Caucasian would think about a black man or black men wearing hoodies on the sideline. Really asinine and stupid.
All right. Are we talking about fiction? We're talking about facts. Talking about fiction, pardon my back. We will leave it there.
Oh, please, pardon your back. You just want your back to get blown out by a black man. How about that? All right. So now Stephen A., a couple of days later, he decided that he was going to double back and levy another attack on his favorite target in the sports world, or his favorite targets, that being the young black male athlete. I've stated in the past, in regards to this issue, many times you'll see the so-called black man will try to address or attack so-called black men because he knows that he can get away with it, right? This is the source of a lot of the issues in regards to what the so-called white man calls black on black crime. It's part of this, really an offshoot of the deculturalization of the so-called black community and the disenfranchisement of the so-called black man, taking away his history and him not understanding how to reclaim it back, how to get it back, which starts with self-validation, not being validated or being worried about trying to prove things to non-blacks is a major problem. This is why I highlighted Stephen A.'s Freudian slip in regards to his concerns about what he believes the Caucasian would think when seeing so-called black men with hoodies on, pardon me. Okay? It's a major psychological issue, and this is why I always use the term so-called black for those who always ask me, because the term black, number one, is a corporate term. Number two, when you call yourself black, that means that you are directly associated with whoever it is that's white, because black only is relevant when you have white. When you go by your actual ancestral term or your ancestral name, if you know what that is, your ancestral term or your ancestral name is not directly correlated or predicated off of the existence of the polar opposite. You understand? Like, you cannot have north without south. You can't have east without west. You can't have black without white. You cannot have yin without yang. They are not only correlated, but they're directly dependent upon each other. As long as so-called black people keep trying to promote pro-blackness, really what they're saying is that we want to be validated by the Caucasian, the so-called white. That's all being pro-black means. Being pro-black does not mean that you love blackness, quote unquote. It means that you need to be validated by the Caucasian, by the white. And a lot of black people have not really delved into this understanding. Why? Because most of our people are just two-dimensional thinkers. All right. But anyway, let me let Stephen A. go into some of his vain and frivolous justifications for his statements. And of course, I'm going to chime in.
Recently, when Cam Newton abruptly walked out of a press conference, I had a suggestion. Perhaps someone should take the time to ask him about whatever off-the-field troubles he may have had, even dating back to 2010 when he started Auburn University. Now, to be clear, I'm speaking facetiously, of course. The goal wasn't to really do that, because personally, I don't think it's right to get into any of these athletes' personal lives unless they invite you to or end up in the police blotters. But I suggested it, tongue-in-cheek specifically, to address the softness that we've witnessed for far too long from these guys.
Now, he just did something that I know. He just evoked a sentiment that I've already alluded to earlier in the video. This is something that you see a lot with many of the media members, talking about how soft or sensitive many of these athletes are. I don't think that they're soft or sensitive per se. Most of them aren't anyway. I just think that many of them are immature. They have not been trained on how to deal with many of these provocateurs in the media who are just looking for a reaction, right? Most of these people are just trolls. They're frustrated with their own inability to be where the athlete is, and they're trying to tear the athlete down or get them to respond or react to negative stimuli, so that they could feel like, oh, I got into this person's head. So no, I don't necessarily think that most of these guys are sensitive. I think that term is overused sometimes so that so that the person who is trying to get the attention of the athlete or who is involved in the back and forth with the athlete can feel like I got in this person's head. Really, you're just an annoyance. That's really all you are. That's why Cam Newton acts that way, but he's paid to not act that way. He's paid to handle those issues better. That was my point with the situation that he got into with, that goofy face white chick that he got into where he talked about routes. And, some of the pro-black dudes got upset, in part one of that video. They got upset about that. But when you handle yourself with a king mentality, you have to already go to the podium, already envisioning in your mind certain type of questions, how they're going to be asked and how you're going to respond. All right? There's just a certain way to handle these situations. Like even with the Kaepernick thing, how Cam Newton handled it so poorly. He wasn't thinking. As soon as that situation came out, he should have already envisioned how he was going to respond to that issue. To me, it's very simple. All he had to say is, I'm a Carolina Panther. I'm only going to respond to questions relating to Carolina Panthers football. I'm not here to talk about Colin Kaepernick or any non-Carolina Panthers related issues. When a chick asked him about routes, all he had to say is, yes, Funchess has been fighting through his routes. He's doing a great job for us. That's it. Play the same game that they're playing. That's all you have to do. But a lot of these people are trying to push and promote this fake vocal race war. This war of words that they want to keep having with the Caucasian, where they think that they're going to win and, oh, yeah, you told him or you told her, all this bullshit. Why is that? Because like I said before, most of these niggas will not go back to so-called Africa or the motherland, wherever they claim they're from. They don't really want their own society. They don't want to rule. They only want to be with the so-called white man and woman forever and hold hands in the same dysfunctional relationship.
More to the point, the accountability factor some of these athletes want no part of. Did you hear the news? I was recently called an Uncle Tom and a sellout. Except this time.
Well, look, I don't go too much into the whole sellout Uncle Tom stuff. I'm on record as stating that most blacks, particularly the internet revolutionaries, they overuse those terms. But for his statements about the hoodie, that term is almost semi-applicable because that was extremely ignorant. All right, just buffoonishly ignorant. And I use that term ignorant in the literal sense of the term, not how the liberal black female uses it, for anybody who she disagrees with. I use it literally, meaning he just does not know what the fuck he's talking about. To talk about why would Nike design a hoodie for athletes? Like, are you that dumb? Like, that means Stephen A. Smith, all the years that he wore hoodies or wears hoodies, he does not know what a hoodie's for. A hoodie's not for fashion. All right, it was not originally designed for fashion. All right, it was a piece of attire or garb, a garment that was created to protect the head from the weather and also from the release of moisture out of the top of your head. Somebody can get sick like that.
Yep.
When I say get sick like that, meaning if you just let your head release and emit all the moisture out the top without it being covered.
It wasn't because I was imploring brothers losing money left and right to stay off the weed. No. This time it was because I pointed out how bad of a look it was to be seen pouting on the bench with a hoodie on.
No, sir. No, sir. Once again, the reason why people got upset by your statements is because of your association with the hoodie and the perceptions of Caucasians. That's why they got upset. So please stop acting like you don't know why they're mad.
Because you'd lost your starting spot at the time. A couple of years ago, I was labeled a liar and purportedly considered persona non grata because I had the temerity, the unmitigated gall to expose that a superstar had his eyes set on going to another team, which he actually ended up doing.
No, the reason why Kevin Durant called you a liar is because he said he never told you anything. You stated that somebody in his inner circle told you. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. Well, here's what I will say about Stephen A. Smith. Even though I address many of his statements, I'm not crazy about many of his stances. When he does break news in regards to player movement, he's normally correct. He was correct both times with LeBron. He was correct with Kevin Durant. So his reputation as a journalist, meaning somebody who breaks stories, is pretty faultless. I will give him that. Now, in the age that we live in, where media members are now talking heads, this is where people are going to have certain issues with him, because he tries to promote a lot of erroneous sentiments, things that are just baseless and silly, particularly in regards to race, which he, like most so-called black people, don't understand. Most of our people don't even understand what their race is.
My buddy, the Hall of Famer that is Charles Barkley, was once excoriated by a superstar player, reminding the world that he once threw someone through a plate glass window and had unpaid debts in Vegas. All because Barkley said he was whining about needing more help when he already had a championship caliber squad.
No, sir. Once again, you're not reporting exactly what was stated. The reason why LeBron, and that's who he's talking about, the reason why LeBron James came back at Charles Barkley like that was not because of what Charles Barkley stated about LeBron being on a championship level team. It's because of what Charles stated about LeBron not wanting to compete. All right. He said LeBron did not want to compete. Charles Barkley tries to act like he was, like he's the only guy in NBA history who wanted to compete. And this is why, of all the former great athletes to ever play, he catches the most heat for not winning a championship, because he has the most mouth. You very, very rarely ever hear about, people talking about, well, John Stockton or Karl Malone or Patrick Ewing or Reggie Miller never won championships. They always get on Charles. You know why? Because Charles has the biggest mouth and he talks like he competed every game, and that's not true. This is the same guy who admitted that he came into the season with the Rockets his last year totally out of shape because he felt like he wasn't getting paid the amount of money he was supposed to get paid. So you had no professional pride to come into camp in shape. All right? That's the bottom line of it.
That's it. I could go on because there are alarmingly more issues of player sensitivity in this day and age than any of us would have ever imagined.
Well, there's also some issues of media sensitivity, and you know that because you're the most sensitive person on television. I've seen you have more personality breakdowns on TV, on screen than anybody else. Totally fly off the handle. This is why they call you Screaming A. Smith. This is why you sit up there on your high horse and talk about how you were raised by women. Why would any man want to brag about that? Especially one who did not come out of a single parent home. Your father was there. So when you say that you were raised by women, really what you're saying is that, you don't really want to give, due reverence to your father for being there in your life. Very sad state of affairs.
But I'm sure y'all get the point.
Oh, I get the point. I get the point. You backpedaling, you going backwards like Michael Jackson on the damn Motown 25th anniversary stage.
And notice I haven't said any names. And it's not necessary because there's no one individual per se. That's the problem. You know what the problem is?
Yeah, poor reporting on your part in regards to what your statements were, which led to the issue with J.R. Smith. Now, in regards to your overall reporting and breaking of news in the NBA, I don't have any quibbles. But in regards to your reporting of events that have led to issues between media members and players, you're disingenuous, sir. You're disingenuous. And no, these athletes are not being sensitive. They're human beings. They do have the right to respond back to your statements. They don't have to just sit there and lie and allow you to run your mouth with statements that they feel like are unfounded or erroneous.
It's the culture. Because of their brand, their hanger-ons, and their supposed business interests, every little critique is perceived as an indictable offense.
Well, aren't you on TV right now talking about J.R. Smith's critique of you? How come he can't make a response to what you said, but you can respond to him? It's like one of these loudmouth women who want to go back and forth all day. But if a man responds to her, all of a sudden he's being like a female. But if she goes on and on all day, it's not that she's immature or that she's out of control. It's just that she has the right to state her feelings. You can't have it both ways. All right. There's going to be an interaction, an exchange between two parties. If one or both parties feel like the message that's coming at them is unfair, unjust, or erroneous.
Worse, half the time it's not ever perceived by the players themselves. Folks go to them and tell them who to love, who to hate, who to ignore, who to embrace. And they buy it, hook, line, and sinker. without ever speaking to people themselves.
Oh, yeah, kind of like what you did when you didn't call Carmelo, when you reported that story about him that was erroneous, and that he had to, when he had to call you up and check you. Like that, right? But then again, Steve, is that what it's really about? Are you mad because KD and LeBron won't sit down and have an interview with you? Is that why you're mad? Remember, Stephen A. is also the guy who's upset with Derek Jeter. And when I say he's upset with Derek Jeter, he's not upset with him per se. He's upset with the that platform that Jeter has created for the athletes, where the athletes can get their own stories out. Stephen A. Smith feels like, and justifiably so, that the conventional media is being marginalized by the internet. People are not going to him for stories anymore. Now they're going to the internet. Now people go on YouTube and Google and the internet platforms to get their information. The age of print journalism is almost at an end.
Real communication directly between the supposed combative parties are actually manipulated by folks in their ears with their own agendas. And it's not going to get any better, ladies and gentlemen. It just ain't. It's only going to get worse. And it's not because these athletes are not men capable of speaking up for themselves directly with the folks they take issue with. It's because they're encouraged to let others handle their issues for them. For Lord knows what reason. It's sad, real.
Well, we know what reason is because people like you are going to take whatever they say and try to use it against them. Just like you did J.R. Smith's Twitter post, where now you're trying to make him out to be some super sensitive guy because he responded to the correlation, the erroneous equivalency that you made between his mental state and how Caucasian people would view black athletes in hoodies, which is the only thing that he complained about. He never once complained about any of your statements towards him. The only thing that he complained about was how you tried to connect him with the Caucasian perception of a black man in a hoodie with Trayvon Martin. I mean, come on, man.
Really, but there's always a silver lining. They still have to play the games at the end of the day. And we'll still be watching.
Of course we will, and we got a good game tonight.
That was his way of saying, look, you can get mad at me all you want. I still have the power to affect you because I have this platform. I come on here every day and I get to run my mouth and you don't. And once again, this is why people like Stephen A. Smith are upset with the platform that Derek Jeter has set up for the athletes to dispense their own version of events, because now it's starting to equalize the playing field. At one time, the print media could really skew how the public felt about an athlete because of the power of the pen. This is where you get the statement that the pen is mightier than the sword, because with a sword, you can kill a man directly, but you'd have to pay for it. With the pen, you can kill a man with words and you don't really even have to pay for it unless you're found guilty of libel. As long as many of the statements that you're saying really cannot be disproven, world that we live in. The world that we live in now is, can you disprove it? In regards to many of the allegations that people make about athletes that they may be jealous of in some way. And Stephen A. Smith, the jealousy permeates from him. All this really is just about him wishing that his knee didn't crack in half and that he could have got a chance to make it in the NBA. That's really all it's about. But, it is what it is. We'll see where this goes. Stephen A. tried a red herring with his switcheroo on J.R. Smith, trying to make it like J.R. Smith is trying to cover up for his poor play. I don't think that J.R. Smith is trying to cover up for his poor play at all. J.R. is a streak shooter. He's not a star player. Stephen A. tried to pick on somebody who he felt like couldn't fight back. And in the process of him doing so, he revealed himself and his psychological issues about race, which you see many times with many of these commentators, Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharp, how infatuated they are with the acceptance of the Caucasian, which once again is why I keep talking about it. Many of these so-called pro-blacks, liberal blacks, boule blacks, whatever demographic they are, they feel guilty about how much they admire the Caucasian. And they hide their guilt by trying to impose their views on everybody else. This is why, once again, when you reject the ideologies of the pro-black, they want to use words like coon, because they want you to love the Caucasian and seek the Caucasian's validation like they do. Okay, it's very pathetic. But anyway, peace.